February 12th, 1952. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. 6:30 a.m. The shower room sounded like rain trapped in concrete, water pounding tile, steam rising in thick waves, bare feet slapping on wet floor. Bumpy Johnson stood alone under one of the metal shower heads, hot water running down his scarred back. 45 years old, 12 years into a 15-year narcotics sentence. The most dangerous man in Harlem, naked and unarmed in a federal cage. He heard the door click, then boots, 3 sets, Jack the Hammer. Donovan stepped in first, 6'4", 240 pounds, ex-heavyweight boxer, a white supremacist who liked to beat black inmates bloody just for breathing. Behind him, 2 more white inmates, thick, quiet, each holding a shiv sharpened from a spoon and a bed spring. Jack smiled. In his mind, he saw the number that changed everything. Base 500,000. That's what Vito Genovese, New York's most powerful mob boss, had paid to make sure Bumpy Johnson never walked out of Alcatraz alive. What Vito didn't know was this. The man he was about to murder was the same man who'd saved his life. The same man who'd paid for his mother's funeral. The same man who'd buried her with dignity when Vito couldn't. Jack raised the shiv, aiming for Bumpy's spine. The water kept running. Bumpy didn't turn around. He was waiting, because Bumpy Johnson already knew this hit was coming, and he'd turned this shower into a trap. To understand why Vito put a $500,000 price on Bumpy's head, you have to go back 5 years. Clinton Correctional Facility, upstate New York. 1947. Bumpy was doing 3 years for assault. Vito Genovese was there on a federal rap of his own. Prison was tribal. Italians with Italians. Black inmates with black inmates. And when those worlds collided, fights didn't end with broken noses. They ended with bodies. April 8th, 1947. Yard time. Vito walked near the weight pile, alone. 3 Italian inmates followed, soldiers from a rival family, each with a shiv tucked tight in a sleeve. They weren't there to talk. They had quiet orders. Kill Genovese before he gets too powerful. Vito saw them closing in, tried to back away. The yard fence behind him. Nowhere to run. The first man lunged. A shadow moved faster. One punch snapped the attacker's head sideways. He dropped like a sack of bricks. The second man caught a knee to the ribs. Air left his lungs in a grunt. The third swung his shiv. A hand like iron caught his wrist mid-strike, twisted until the metal clanged on concrete. Whistles blew. Guards rushed in. Vito was still standing, uncut. The man who'd saved him? Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. That night, in the mess hall, Vito sat across from Bumpy. "You saved my life today," Vito said quietly. Bumpy shrugged, kept eating. "I mean it. I owe you. When I get out of here, when I'm running things again, you ever need anything, you call me. I don't forget debts." Bumpy looked him in the eyes. "Harlem stays mine. You stay out of it. We'll call that even." Vito nodded, held out his hand. They shook. Then Vito's face changed. For the first time, Bumpy saw something rare in that man. Not arrogance, not hunger. Grief. "My mother died last month," Vito said, voice flat. "Cancer. I couldn't even go to her funeral." He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. A funeral bill from a Brooklyn parlor. $3,200 owed. The scribbled threat of a pauper's grave if it wasn't paid. My family's broke. They can't afford to bury her right. They're talking about putting her in the ground like she was nobody. His eyes, those cold mob eyes, were wet. Bumpy stared at the bill, then stood, walked back to his cell, came out with an envelope. Inside, $3,500 in cash. Money he'd been saving for his own release, his own fresh start. He dropped it on the table. "Bury her right," Bumpy said. "A mother deserves that." Vito stared at the envelope like it was unreal. I can't take this." "You already did," Bumpy said. "Send it tomorrow." Vito picked up the money with shaking hands. "Bumpy, I swear on my mother's grave, I will never forget this. You didn't just save my life. You gave her dignity. I owe you everything." Bumpy walked away. That day, they made two things. Detiwa that went deeper than any mob favor, and a silent deal. Harlem was Bumpy's. Italians would stay out. No war, no blood in the streets. 5 years later, Vito would break both. 1951. Bumpy Johnson was convicted on federal narcotics charges. 15 years. Transferred to Alcatraz. The Rock. The place you send men you want forgotten. By 1957, Vito Genovese was out, back in New York, and rising. Within 2 years, he was one of the most feared bosses in America. One night, he stood over a map of Manhattan in his office. His finger stopped on a name. Harlem. The numbers racket, illegal lottery, was flooding that neighborhood with cash. Millions in nickels and dimes. Poor people's hope converted into pure profit. Vito's underboss pointed. "Boss, this is Bumpy's world. There's that old understanding, remember? From Clinton." Vito's jaw tightened. "Bumpy saved me once. I paid him back when I let that deal live as long as I did," he said. "Debts paid. Harlem's business now, not sentiment." 2 decisions followed. First, send soldiers into Harlem, flip bankers, threaten runners, slowly poison the silent deal. Second, erase the only man who could stop him. He called in Tony, the broker, Scalfani, a fixer who didn't break legs. He arranged disappearances. "I want Bumpy Johnson gone," Vito said. "He's in Alcatraz. I don't care how. Make it look racial, make it look random. But I never want to hear his name again." Tony quoted the number. $500,000. It's federal. It's Alcatraz. It's risky. Vito didn't blink. Done. The man who'd cried over his mother's grave had just bought a death sentence for the man who paid for it. Oh, Jack the Hammer. Donovan got the contract. Life sentence. Irish, violent, openly racist. The kind of man who'd stab a black inmate for sport and smile doing it. Tony visited him in Alcatraz as a lawyer. "I've got an opportunity for you," Tony said through the glass. "There's a man in here named Bumpy Johnson. You kill him in the showers, the yard, wherever, and $50,000 goes to your mother. Cash, no questions." Jack's mother was dying in a Boston charity ward. Medical bills, swallowing what was left of her life. Jack smiled. "I don't need a reason to do it," he said, "but I'll take the money." It should have been perfect. But Bumpy Johnson didn't become king of Harlem by hoping things worked out. He became king by knowing everything before it happened. Sal Fontana was a low-level Genovese bookkeeper doing time. He kept numbers so well, he'd ended up in the same prison as the numbers king of Harlem. He'd also been in Clinton in 1947. He'd seen Bumpy step between Vito and three blades. He'd watched Vito take Bumpy's $30,500 for his mother's funeral. He'd heard the whispered stories of the silent deal about Harlem. And now he sat in the Alcatraz yard and listened as word spread. Big money. Jack Donovan. A black inmate named Bumpy. Shower. Soon, Sal felt his stomach twist. That afternoon, he walked up to Bumpy's cell, hands sweating. "Mr. Johnson," he said quietly, "you don't know me, but I know you." Bumpy looked up from a chess game he was playing in his head. "Talk. There's a contract on you. Came straight from Genovese. They're sending Jack Donovan. Shower or the yard, but it's soon." Bumpy's face didn't move. "Who are you to tell me that?" he asked. "Sal Fontana," he said, "Genovese family bookkeeper. Or I was, before I grew a conscience." "Why now?" Sal swallowed. "In '47, I watched you save Vito's life. I watched you pay for his mother's burial. I watched him swear on her grave he'd never forget." He stared at the floor, but he forgot, or he didn't care. Either way, a man who spits on a debt like that, he doesn't deserve my loyalty. He looked up. "He plans to kill you in the shower, Mr. Johnson. I figured you deserved to hear it from one of his own." Bumpy studied him for a long time, then nodded once. "I won't forget this, Sal." He went back to his bunk and started to think. Bumpy had three things Jack Donovan didn't. Information. He knew the hit was coming. Network. He had debts owed inside these walls. Discipline. He'd been fighting since Charleston streets, long before Harlem. He didn't panic. He made a plan. First, he bought himself a blind spot. Guard Morrison was on the edge, divorced, drinking, deep in gambling debt. The kind of man who looked the other way for the right price. Bumpy got to him with $200 slipped through three hands. "Don't cut anything obvious," Bumpy said. "Just tilt the eyes." Morrison repositioned the shower cameras so the far corner fell into shadow. Enough to blur faces. Enough to give 5 minutes of plausible deniability. Second, Bumpy cashed in a favor from Carlos Mendez, a Mexican lifer who ran the kitchen and owed Bumpy for protecting his younger cousin in a yard dispute. "When I raise my hand," Bumpy told him, "you give me 30 seconds of darkness. No more, no less. Any longer, guards come running." Carlos nodded. 30 seconds. Third, Bumpy picked his battlefield. The shower, wet tile, echoes, steam thick as fog, blind spots on the cameras. No weapons allowed, at least officially. He went to sleep calm. The man getting hunted had just become the man laying a trap. February 12th, 1952, 6:30 a.m. The shower room hummed with white noise, water slamming metal, hissing down, steam rolling along the ceiling, the floor slick underfoot. Bumpy stood in the far corner, directly in the camera's new blind spot. Back turned, hands on the wall, head down like he was just another tired prisoner starting another day. The door opened with a heavy metallic sigh. Jack Donovan stepped in. 2 men behind him. One blocked the door, the other flanked to the side. Jack grinned when he saw Bumpy's naked back. "Bumpy Johnson," he said loud, letting the words echo. "Your ride's over." Bumpy didn't move. "Vito sent you," he said quietly over the sound of water. "How much did he pay to break his mother's grave?" Jack laughed. 50 grand, more than you're worth." Bumpy lifted one hand slowly. In the ceiling above the corridor, Carlos flipped a breaker. Chiu darkness. Not dim, not shadow. Total. The lights died. The world turned black. Only 3 things remained. The hammering water on tile. The staggered breathing of 3 excited killers. And Bumpy's heartbeat, slow, steady. Jack lunged first, muscle memory driving him at the silhouette he thought he'd memorized. His shiv cut nothing but steam. To his right, someone screamed. A wet thud followed, flesh hitting tile. Bumpy's voice floated through the dark. "You can't kill what you can't see." Another grunt. The metallic smell of blood spilled into the hot air, riding on steam. Jack's feet slid on something slick, water, soap, or blood. He couldn't tell. A hand grabbed the wrist of the second attacker. There was a twist, a pop, and the sound of metal bouncing across tile. The man gurgled, choked, went silent. The third man panicked. "Shoot him! Shoot high!" His words cut off in a strangled howl as Bumpy drove a shoulder into his ribs, slamming him into the wall. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. He slumped. The only sound now was water and the harsh rasp of Jack's own breathing. "Come on, then!" Jack shouted into the dark. "Come on!" He slashed in a wild arc. A hand like iron closed around his wrist. Pressure. Then, crack. The bone snapped like a wet stick. Pain exploded up his arm. The shiv dropped, clattering loud against the tile, the sound sharp in the blind night. Jack screamed. The lights flicked back on. 30 seconds exactly. Steam hung low. Water still hammered the floor. 2 men were down. One curled on his side, gasping, arm twisted at a sick angle. One on his back, eyes rolled up, blood mingling with the water in a pink spiral washing toward the drain. Jack was on his knees, cradling his broken wrist. His chest heaved. His eyes darted around in panic. And Bumpy? He stood in the center of it all, water cascading over his shoulders. Unmarked. Calm. The steam made him look less like a prisoner and more like a ghost that refused to vanish. Jack tried to scramble back. Bumpy bent, picked up the fallen shiv. He laid the cold metal against Jack's throat. "I could kill you right now," Bumpy said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "But I'm not going to." Jack's breath hitched. Why not?" Bumpy leaned close. "Because dead men don't deliver messages." He pulled the shiv away from Jack's throat and pressed it against his chest. Jack screamed as the blade bit skin. 4 slow strokes, 4 letters. V-I-T-O. Blood mixed with soap and water, swirling down the drain in thin red ribbons. Bumpy dropped the shiv, straightened up. He leaned down so only Jack could hear. "I don't kill messengers," Bumpy whispered. "I make them." Jack sobbed, clutching his ruined wrist and bleeding chest. Bumpy stepped back, raised his voice so the room, so the cameras, could hear. "Tell Vito this," he said. "Tell him I paid for his mother's funeral. He paid for my execution. Betrayal has a price, and I'm the one who collects." He took one step back into the streaming water. Guards burst through the door, batons out. Bumpy lifted his hands. "Self-defense," he said. "Check the cameras." All they saw on the footage later was this. Jack Donovan and 2 white inmates entering the shower. The camera losing them in the steam-blurred corner. bodies going down. Bumpy backing away, hands up. No knife, no clear attack. No way to prove anything more than a fight gone very, very wrong. Officially, it was an altercation between inmates. Unofficially, it was the day every prisoner on the Rock learned. You don't come at Bumpy Johnson with 3 men and a knife. You bring an army. And even then, you'd better be ready to die. 3 days later, an unmarked envelope slid onto the desk in Vito Genovese's Little Italy social club. Inside was a Polaroid. Vito opened it alone. The picture showed Jack Donovan stripped to the waist on a prison hospital cot, gauze taped sloppily across his chest, a bloom of red leaking through. But the camera had caught the letters anyway, carved deep enough to show even under bandage edges. VITO. Underneath, in black ink, a single line of handwriting. You sent 3 men. I sent 1 message. BJ. Vito's hand shook. The photo slipped from his fingers, landed face up on the desk. His underboss walked in, saw it, went pale. "Boss, word's all over the system," he said. "They're saying Bumpy took on 3 men in a shower, in the dark, broke them, carved your name into Donovan like a tattoo, then walked out without a scratch." He swallowed. "They're saying you sent a hitman and came back with a billboard." Vito stared at the photo, the letters. His own name, written in blood on another man's skin. "Get out," he said softly. The underboss left. Vito was alone with the Polaroid and the ghost of a yard in 1947. The sound of his own voice swearing on his mother's grave that he would never forget the man who saved him. He hadn't forgotten. He just hadn't cared. For the outside world, Bumpy Johnson vanished into Alcatraz. For the underworld, his legend exploded. Every new inmate carried some version of the story. 3 men with blades. Lights out. 30 seconds. Bumpy walking out. Vito carved into a human chest like a warning sign. In New York, the Polaroid did the rest. Mob guys passed it hand to hand, a forbidden relic. The day the Harlem King sent a message from a cage. Old school bosses shook their heads. "You can't cage a Harlem King," one captain told another. "You can only make him angrier." Meanwhile, Vito's Harlem push started to rot from the inside. Every time he tried to tighten his grip, something slipped. Numbers banks got robbed, always his, never anyone else's. Runners disappeared off his payroll, reappeared under quiet new management. Cops he thought he owned suddenly stopped answering his calls. Paranoia ate him alive. When a loyal capo got accused of skimming, Vito had him killed. Then learned later the man was clean. The capo's son, Carmine, heard the truth. The man who'd ordered his father's death wasn't Bumpy. It was Vito. So Carmine did what Sal Fontana had done years earlier inside Alcatraz. He switched sides. He reached out to Illinois Gordon, Bumpy's lieutenant holding Harlem together on the outside. "When Bumpy comes home," Carmine said, "tell him I'm ready. I'll burn everything Vito built if it means he feels what I felt." By the time Bumpy walked out of Alcatraz in 1963, Vito's Harlem empire was a hollow shell held together by fear and old stories. Stories that ended with 4 letters carved across a man's chest. June 1963. The gates of Alcatraz opened. Bumpy Johnson stepped into the daylight, older but unbroken. Illinois. Gordon waited in a car. They drove through Harlem slow. "It ain't the same, Bump," Illinois said. Vito's had his claws in here for years. Numbers, protection, dope. People are scared. Bumpy watched kids playing in broken streets, women dragging groceries up cracked sidewalks, men on stoops watching everything and saying nothing. They were scared when Dutch Schultz came, Bumpy said. They were scared when the cops came. Fear don't last. Respect does. Within 72 hours, he started pulling his world back. Better odds on numbers. Free protection for anyone Vito's guys threatened. Quiet favors cashed in from men who still remembered who paid their rent in '38. And when Carmine walked into Bumpy's back room and laid the story of his father on the table, Bumpy didn't smile. He just nodded once. Vito killed his own man because he saw shadows, Bumpy said. Good. Let's give him more shadows to chase. 1959 had flipped Vito's world. Narcotics charges, federal time. By 1964, the man who'd once ordered a $500,000 hit now wore khaki like every other convict, locked in a federal pen in Atlanta. One morning, a guard knocked on his cell. "You got a visitor," the guard said. "I don't take visitors." The guard snorted. "You'll take this one." 5 minutes later, Vito sat in a plastic chair, staring through thick glass. On the other side sat Bumpy Johnson, older, lines carved deep in his face. But his eyes were the same. Cold, sharp, alive. For the first time in a long time, Vito didn't feel like a boss. He felt like a man who'd made a mistake he could never buy his way out of. "You remember 1947? Bumpy asked quietly. "Clinton, 3 men with blades, you on the ground, me standing over you." Vito said nothing. "You remember the funeral bill?" Bumpy continued. $3,500, my money, my fresh start. I gave it to you because you cried for your mother in front of me." Vito's jaw clenched. "I remember. You swore on her grave you'd never forget," Bumpy said. He leaned closer to the glass. "You didn't forget. You just didn't care." Vito looked down at his hands. "I cared," he said hoarsely. "I just cared more about Harlem, about power, about not looking weak." He looked up. "I think about that shower every night, about Jack, about my name on his chest, about how you walked out and I ended up in here." Bumpy studied his face. "Then you finally learned something," Bumpy said. "You didn't betray me, Vito. You betrayed yourself. A man who cries for his mother still has a soul. You sold yours for territory you never even kept." For a moment, there was something almost like pity in Bumpy's eyes. Almost. "I don't forgive you," Bumpy said. "You don't deserve that. But I don't hate you either. Hate's for men who still matter." He stood. "I gave you your mother's funeral. You gave me a death sentence. Now you get to die in a cage while I die free." He paused. "Call it even." Vito flinched like he'd been slapped. Bumpy turned and walked away. Vito slammed his fists against the glass. "Bumpy," he shouted. "I was wrong. I know that now. I know." No sound reached the other side. The guard put a hand on his shoulder. "Sit down, Genovese," the guard said. "You're just making noise now." As Bumpy walked past the guard station, one of the younger guards leaned over to his partner. "That's him?" he whispered. "The Harlem guy?" "Yeah," the older one said. "They caged him for 12 years, tried to carve his story off the map." The younger guard shook his head. "How'd that work out?" The older guard watched Bumpy step through the gate like it was just a door, not a barrier. "You can't cage a Harlem king," he said. you can only make him angrier. Vito Genovese died in prison in 1969. Alone, sick, surrounded not by family or power, but by cinder block, steel, and the echo of his own choices. The scar across Jack Donovan's chest outlived him. Men told the story of those 4 letters long after Jack himself disappeared into the system. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968 on a Harlem sidewalk, free. Thousands lined the streets for his funeral, not because he was perfect, but because he'd paid his debts and collected every one owed to him. Dutch Schultz tried to break Harlem and failed. The 5 families tried to buy it and failed. Vito tried to kill its king in a shower and ended up dying in a cage. Bumpy understood something none of them ever did. Guns scare people. Money tempts people. But loyalty? Loyalty decides who gets remembered. Betrayal carves its own scars. And Bumpy made sure Vito's lasted forever. This story is dramatized from documented history, Harlem street legends, and long-whispered rumors about prison hits and underworld debts. Specific conversations are reconstructed, but the power, the fear, and the names were very real. I really want to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. This story has reached readers on every continent, and I'm always amazed by how far these legends travel. Drop a comment. Share this story. Let's talk about it. If this story of the bloodiest wedding in Harlem history hit different, drop a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.